is Joanna and welcome to my kitchen. I promised you a video on making kale burgers and this is that video. I want to let you know that even though I call them kale burgers, they're really kale and meat burgers. So if you're vegan or vegetarian, this is not going to be your favorite recipe. So perhaps I will make one in the future where I'll use lentils or beans and you can tune in for that. But if you would like to make an omnivore's meal, this is what I'm making today. I am a bright line eater, and that means that I weigh and measure my portions. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that for other bright line eaters. If you're not, you can make these without worrying so much about weighing and measuring. So the basic ingredients today, I'm using elk meat. It's very low fat. It's a game meat. You can also choose really any ground meat that you enjoy. The reason that I started doing these, particularly with the mushrooms and onions and kale, was because I was using grass-fed beef and it's very low in fat, and when you cook them, they tend to get a little dry, and so this actually makes them very moist and tender, which I love. And it also provides greens in with meat, which is really adds to the health of just the nourishment factor of it. First thing I'm going to do is get my oven started. So I'm going to turn on the oven to 400, which may sound a little high, but because we're adding the kale and the onions and mushrooms, you can cook it at a higher temperature even with a low-fat meat. So I'm going to start out making all of my veggies into the same texture as the meat. So I'm going to get some mushrooms, and what I'm going to recommend if you are a bright line eater is that you cook your mushrooms and onions first and then weigh them, and then you'll know when you separate them out into your patties how much vegetables you're getting in each patty. If you're not a bright line eater, don't worry about it. So because I'm going to go right away to blending these up, I'm going to do something I normally wouldn't do with mushrooms, but I'm going to just rinse them in water. So I'm going to just spray them a little bit. If I were using them raw, I would never do this because I don't want them to soak up too much liquid, but I am going to be cooking them. So I'm just going to make it easy on myself and spray them with water. So I'm going to now slice off the ends, and I'm just going to be putting them in the food processor to process. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. And what I find with the mushrooms is if I don't chop them up before I put them into the processor, they just kind of roll around in there. So I'm going to say that's about 2 cups of mushrooms. That's my estimation. So I'm just cutting off the ends. I'm doing a rough chop. You don't have to cut off as much of the end as I'm doing, but they're a little bit dirty. So if I was doing this on like a regular TV show, these would already be prepped, and I would just go, ta-da! So these aren't. So the main ingredients for this are going to be mushrooms, onions, and kale. And then some spices, and I'll talk a little bit about the spices now. You can really use whatever flavor palette you want. I have gotten a little bit, I don't want to say lazy, but kind of a little lazy. I used to make them with rosemary. And I liked it. It was a really nice flavor for these. But I've also found that I enjoy these kind of spice blends. This one is 21 Spice Salute from Trader Joe's, and it has a lot of different spices, some chili, some garlic, marjoram, oregano, thyme. It's kind of a fun blend. And then this is super, like, you know, basic, the steak seasoning. And it has a lot of salt in it, actually, so I don't add any extra salt. And I kind of like how it brings out the flavor in there. So I've come to using those a lot more lately. But I really encourage you to play around with the spices that you enjoy and try different ones and see what you like. You could make them like a curry version with turmeric and cumin, some coriander, little ginger. I think that would be a really nice change. You could do kind of a Hungarian, like a smoked paprika and garlic. So don't be afraid to try different spice mixtures that you enjoy and bring that flavor into these. Okay, just a couple more. So at least you're getting a realistic idea of how long this takes to do. Okay. So I'm going to put this on my, it's going to be a little tricky to put that back in. Okay. I think that'll work. And put this on top. And we're just going to pulse it. So I don't want to make it into a mash. So that's why I'm just doing the little pulse, 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 so that it'll be well ground, but not too mushy. Yeah, perfect. So these are, I should have said the type of mushrooms. These are called cremini mushrooms. They're also sometimes referred to as baby bellas. So they're the small version of a portobello mushroom. And they have a nice kind of rich flavor to them. I prefer them to like a white button mushroom. I've also done this with a combination of these and shiitake mushrooms. If you're interested in that, they have a really, really nice flavor, and they also increase the nutritional value. Shiitakes are really good for you. So that's another option. Okay, so I've got my mushrooms, and now I'm gonna do my onions. And really, I probably should have done this the other way around, onion first, because I'm going to actually cook the onions before the mushrooms. But that was, so start cooking your onions and then do your mushrooms. I think when I get on camera, I get very nervous, and so I don't always do things in the right order. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. So I'm just gonna chop this onion in half and then just into large chunks so that it can process and it won't just kind of spin around in the food processor. If you don't have a food processor and you're doing this by hand, you can do this by hand. It would be just a small mince. And so just to give you an example of that, what I would do is slice each one of these into much smaller slices, even as small as you can go. I'm just getting my fingers out of the way. I'm just going to take a small amount of that. And then I might go sideways and do a couple of cuts this way. And then I'm going to hold them tight and cut down. And I'm keeping my fingers and thumbs out of the way. I'm just doing a little mince. So that would be if I don't have a food processor. And if you like to just, do all your chopping that way, that's perfectly fine. So you could, that's a little bigger than I'm gonna make it in the food processor, but I know maybe not everybody has one. Okay. Whoop. Lost a bit of onion there. So, there we go. And again, I'm going to use my pulse. So that made a really nice fine mince. And I'm going to turn on my pan. And I'm going to do kind of a medium-high heat. And I'm going to take some oil. I'm going to do a little avocado oil. If you're a bright line eater, again, you may be not using oil to cook this, and that's fine. You could do it with water as well. I'm on maintenance, and so I have one of my ads is a little extra oil, a little extra fat. So I didn't measure. You can measure if you want to. But you can, again, do this with a... If you do it with water, just know you won't get the kind of crispiness of the onion, but it'll still taste fine. Okay, so I'm going to let that heat up a little bit. If I was using garlic in this recipe, I would put the garlic in with the onions. I'm not going to, but that would be the time to do that. What I am going to do is put in a little bit of the steak seasoning in with it, because like I said, it has a little bit of salt. And what I want to do is get the onions to sweat a little bit. And if you're not familiar with that term, when the water comes off of vegetables, they become a little bit crispier. So you call it sweating, because they're literally sweating. So we're going to put... This is one thing that makes a difference sometimes in what people often will put their spices in a little bit late. I like to put my spices in early, and the reason for that is they open up a little bit, and you can actually, they kind of pop and simmer, and you'll get more flavor out of them. So I'm being kind of random about the amounts here. That's about 2 teaspoons of the Lowry's and about 1 teaspoon of the 21 Spice Salute. And I'm just going to let that cook in the oil a little bit. And I'm starting to smell it. I'm starting to smell the flavors kind of expand there. I don't want to burn them, but it is nice to just get that little bit started before I put in the onion. So I'm going to take out my blade here so I don't cut myself. And I'm going to put in the onion, and I can tell it's going to, yeah, you can hear the sizzle. So that's a good, nice hot pan for that. So I'm going to just make sure this doesn't burn. So I'm going to saute the onion with the spices, and it's going to start to get a really nice flavor going there. And smell. I'm going to cook these for a couple of minutes before I put in the mushrooms. The mushrooms are much wetter than the onion. So now I am in Tucson, Arizona, and I do want to say that this is going to be different if you are in a place that is more humid. So in Tucson, the humidity is about like between 6 and 12%. And I make these here, and when they, sweating doesn't take very long because everything is evaporating constantly. But when I've done these at my uncle's house, which is right on the beach in Rhode Island, the sweating took a whole lot longer, and when I cooked them, they were actually in a pool of water at the end because there was so much moisture and it wasn't evaporating as well. So if I was to do them again in a wet environment, I would probably increase the temperature and to try and sweat off more of the liquid than I have to do here. So instead of 400, I might do 450 if you were in a wet environment, a humid place. Join me on the next video for part 2.